Hello, friends. I've brought you another heartfelt story, one that will take you back to Arizona. 1874. It's the story of an Apache warrior who lives by honor, and a woman who's lost everything to lies and betrayal. Two strangers, brought together by fate, fighting for dignity, love, and a place to belong in a world that turned its back on them. If stories like this move you, please subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers, so together, we can keep sharing tales that touch the soul and remind us what it means to be human. So sit back, my friends, and let the story begin. The Arizona sun beat down like a curse that afternoon, turning the dust in the square into fire beneath her feet. Amelia's wrists were bound, her lips cracked, her dress stained by the desert and the long days of walking in chains. Around her, the men of the border town gathered like vultures, laughing, spitting, trading silver coins as though she were another mule to be sold. She lifted her chin despite the fear clawing inside her. She would not let them see her break. Somewhere deep in her chest, a voice whispered that dignity was the one thing they could never auction away. "Start her at $10, barked the trader. A roar of laughter answered him. A man called out something foul. Another reached for her ankle, testing the merchandise. Amelia jerked back, her face burning with shame. Then the crowd fell silent. A tall figure stepped out from the shade. Dark eyes, skin the color of red earth, hair bound with leather. He moved with the quiet of the wind before a storm. The Apache man said nothing. His gaze was steady, unreadable, and somehow, he laid a small pouch on the table. The coins inside clinked softly. "I'll take her," he said in measured English. The trader frowned. "She's not worth—" The man's eyes lifted, sharp as an arrow. "You sold her. She's mine now." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some men laughed, others whispered. An Indian buying a white woman, a scandal in any other town. But none dared challenge the look in his eyes. Amelia's heart pounded. She didn't know whether to feel rescued or trapped all over again. When he cut the rope from her wrists, his touch was gentle, careful, as though he feared breaking something already fragile. "Come," he said simply. She followed him through the silent crowd, her head high, her body trembling. No one stopped them. As they left the town behind, the desert stretched endlessly ahead, scarlet rocks, dying sunlight, the cry of hawks echoing from the cliffs. She wanted to ask him why he had done it, but exhaustion silenced her. When they reached a small canyon camp at dusk, he gave her water, bread, and a blanket. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "My name is Nantan," he said. "You are safe now." Amelia looked at him through the firelight, the man who had bought her freedom. Tears welled in her eyes, though she didn't know why. Perhaps it was the first time in months that someone had spoken to her without cruelty. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried, and with it, a fragile hope was born. When Amelia awoke, the world was still painted in the pale gold of dawn. The desert air was cool, and the embers of last night's fire breathed faint wisps of smoke. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the ache in her body returned, and with it, the memory of chains, the auction, and the silent man who had freed her. Nantan sat a few feet away, sharpening a knife on a stone. He didn't look at her, but she felt his awareness, like the desert wind that knows every grain of sand it touches. A small pot simmered near the coals, its scent earthy and strange. He spoke first. "You can eat," she hesitated, clutching the blanket closer. "Why did you buy me?" The words caught in her throat. "I have nothing to give you." He paused, the stone still in his hand. "No one should be owned," he said simply. "I paid so they would let you live." Amelia looked at him, unsure if she could believe such kindness from a stranger. His voice held no pride, no demand, just quiet truth. She took the bowl he handed her, her hands shaking slightly as she ate. The food was plain but good, warm, real. Nantan stood and began packing his saddle. "We go east. My people live by the red cliffs. You will be safe there." "Safe?" she echoed softly. "With your tribe?" He nodded. "They will not harm you. I will speak for you." She watched him move, graceful, certain, as if every step had purpose. He wasn't like the white men she'd known. There was no arrogance in him, no hunger for control. Just calm strength and something older, like the land itself. As they rode, silence stretched between them, broken only by the creak of leather and the cry of eagles overhead. The vastness of the desert humbled her. Every ridge and canyon seemed to whisper stories older than she could imagine. For the first time since she'd been captured, she felt the faint stirrings of peace. By midday, they stopped near a stream winding through a grove of cottonwoods. Amelia knelt to drink, the cool water shocking against her lips. When she looked up, Nantan was watching her. Not with desire, but with a strange gentleness. "You were not meant for cages," he said quietly. "The world tried to break you, but it failed." The words pierced her heart. No one had spoken to her that way before. Not even her father, before the war had taken everything. Her eyes stung. She turned away, pretending to fix her hair. That night, as stars spilled across the sky, Nantan spoke softly in his native tongue. Words she couldn't understand, but somehow felt. She wondered if he was praying, and for the first time in months, she lay down without fear. As she drifted into sleep, she thought, perhaps freedom doesn't come all at once. Perhaps it begins with someone seeing you as human again. The trail wound through canyons that burned crimson beneath the afternoon sun. Amelia rode behind Nantan, her horse weary but sure-footed on the narrow path. The sound of wind echoed through stone arches, whispering like spirits of the old world. She had never seen land so fierce and beautiful all at once, a place where even silence seemed alive. By the time they reached the valley, dusk had settled, painting the cliffs in violet and gold. Below them, nestled near a river, was a cluster of lodges made from hide and willow. Smoke rose from the fires, curling into the darkening sky. The smell of roasting maize and cedar drifted upward, carrying memories of home she thought she'd lost forever. As they descended, figures emerged, men, women, children, all pausing their work to watch. Amelia's heart pounded. She felt their eyes, heavy with curiosity and caution. Some spoke softly among themselves, and though she couldn't understand the words, the tone was wary. Nantan dismounted first. "Stay close," he murmured. He walked forward, greeting an older man whose face was lined like carved stone. They spoke in Apache, a rhythm of words that rose and fell like drum beats. Amelia waited, her fingers trembling against the reins. When the elder's eyes turned toward her, she felt suddenly small, exposed beneath the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. After a long silence, the old man nodded once. Nantan gestured for her to follow. Inside the village, she was shown to a small hut near the river. A woman named Sani brought her water to wash and a blanket made of soft deerskin. She said little, only offered a faint smile before leaving. Amelia sat alone for a long time, listening to the sounds of laughter and singing from the fires outside. Despite the warmth, she felt like a ghost among the living. When Nantan came to check on her later, he found her staring at the moon reflected on the river's surface. "They don't trust me," she said quietly. "They don't trust what they've been taught to fear," he replied. "But time can teach hearts to see." She looked at him. Really looked. The firelight touched his face, and she saw both strength and sorrow there, as if he carried the weight of 2 worlds. "Why did you help me, Nantan?" she asked. He hesitated, then said softly, "Once I lost someone to men who thought their power gave them the right to take. When I saw you there, I remembered her, and I could not walk away." Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but no words seemed enough. Instead, she whispered, "I'll try not to be a burden." His eyes softened. "You are not a burden, Amelia. You are a person who has survived." When he left, she sat by the fire and felt, for the first time in years, that maybe she could begin again, not as a prisoner or a stranger, but as a woman finding her way back to herself. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life in the village began to steady Amelia's restless heart. Each morning she woke to the sound of river water whispering over stones and the faint laughter of children chasing each other through the cottonwoods. At first they watched her from a distance, the pale woman with frightened eyes and hands that trembled when someone came too close. But slowly, things began to change. It started with a bowl of berries. A small girl, no older than 7, crept to Amelia's door one morning and placed them beside her blanket. When Amelia smiled and whispered thank you, the child giggled and ran away. The next day, there were flowers. The day after, a strip of bright fabric, simple offerings, fragile bridges of trust. Sani, the woman who had given her the blanket that first night, began teaching her words, soft syllables that rolled like music: water, sun, friend. Amelia repeated them until her tongue could shape them without fear. In return, she taught Sani English, laughing when they stumbled through each other's sounds. Language became their shared thread, a way to weave connection where walls once stood. Nantan watched from afar. He never intruded but always seemed near, repairing tools, tending the horses, guiding the young hunters. The people respected him deeply, she noticed. He carried quiet authority, not from rank, but from how he listened, how he acted, without boasting. One afternoon, while helping Sani grind maize, Amelia looked up to find him watching her. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear this time, not gratitude. Something gentler, warmer, and far more dangerous. That evening, a sandstorm swept across the valley. The sky turned copper and grey, the wind howling through the lodges like a ghost. Amelia rushed to secure the coverings on her hut, struggling against the force. Suddenly, Nantan was there beside her, his hands firm on the ropes. "Stay inside," he ordered over the roar of wind. "I can help." But before she could finish, the gust nearly tore the door loose. He caught her arm, pulling her back to safety. The world outside vanished in a storm of dust, and inside the flickering firelight, they stood only inches apart, breathing the same air. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, but a quieter one stirred within. When the wind finally died, Amelia realized her hand was still resting against his chest. She drew it back quickly, whispering, "Thank you." He nodded, eyes unreadable. The desert tests everything, even courage. That night, long after he left, Amelia couldn't sleep. Her heart beat faster than it should, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years, the fragile beginning of hope. Outside, the stars returned, clear and bright, as if the sky itself was trying to tell her, "You have survived the storm, and now you must learn to live again." By the time summer reached the valley, the air shimmered like molten gold. Amelia's hands, once soft and pale, had grown brown from sun and work. She learned to weave mats from reeds, to grind maize without spilling half of it, to gather wild herbs that soothed burns and fevers. Each new skill made her feel a little less like a stranger, and a little more like herself. The people began to accept her, cautiously at first, then with genuine warmth. The children no longer hid behind trees when she walked by. They called her Shiane, meaning gentle hands, after she mended a torn doll one of them had carried since winter. At night, she would sit beside the fires, listening to the elders tell stories of the mountains and the stars. Though she couldn't understand every word, she felt their meaning in the rhythm, in the way their eyes glowed with memory. Nantan often sat quietly nearby. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes not at all, but Amelia had learned that silence could say more than words. His presence had become steady, like the river, calm, strong, always there. One morning she found him teaching 2 boys how to ride bareback. The horses moved like extensions of his will, graceful and fearless. When one boy fell, Nantan lifted him, dusted off his tunic and made him try again. Amelia smiled from the shade, realizing that this man who had once been feared by settlers was, to his people, a protector, not a warrior made of rage, but of compassion. Later that day, he brought her a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a necklace made of turquoise and bone strung on leather. "For you," he said. "The children made it." She traced the beads with her fingers. "It's beautiful," his gaze softened. "It means strength that bends but does not break." She looked up, her voice almost a whisper. "Then it's not just their gift, is it?" He didn't answer, but the faintest smile touched his lips before he walked away. That night, under the blanket of stars, Amelia sat outside her hut, the necklace warm against her skin. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who had stood on an auction block, her worth measured in coins. That woman was gone now, burned away by desert sun and healed by unexpected kindness. She closed her eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the village, the soft laughter, the crackle of fire, the song of crickets in the reeds. And for the first time she felt not like someone passing through, but someone home. Unseen in the shadows, Nantan watched her for a moment before turning toward the cliffs. He didn't need to speak it aloud, but in his heart, he knew. This woman had come into his world like the first rain after drought, bringing life where everything had once been dust. The morning began like any other, soft light spilling over the red cliffs, the air cool and still before the heat came. Amelia was at the river, washing a bundle of herbs Sanny had gathered, when she noticed the birds scatter from the far ridge. 3 riders, dark against the sun, were making their way through the canyon. Her heart tightened. Strangers. By midday, the riders appeared at the edge of the village. Dust clung to their coats, rifles slung across their backs. They were settlers, white men, like the ones who had once sold her life for a handful of coins. Amelia froze as memories surged, the auctioneer's voice, the laughter, the touch she could never forget. Her breath came sharp and shallow. Nantan stepped forward, calm but alert. He spoke in English, his tone measured. "You are far from your trail. What brings you here?" The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, spat into the dirt. "Hunting strays," he said. His eyes flicked toward Amelia, and a cruel grin spread across his face. "Didn't expect to see one of our own among savages." A murmur rippled through the villagers. Nantan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Amelia forced herself to stand beside him. "You should leave," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "There's nothing for you here." The man laughed. "Is that so? You know what they'll do when the soldiers find out you're living with them, girl. You'll hang for treason before they ever ask your name." For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Even the wind held its breath. Then Nantan stepped forward, his voice low but cold as steel. "She belongs to no one," he said. "Not to you." "Not to any man." The settlers shifted uneasy. The scarred man's hand hovered near his gun. "Careful, Redskin." But Nantan didn't flinch. His eyes met the man's, calm and unyielding, the look of someone who had faced worse and lived. Finally, the riders turned their horses. "We'll be back," the leader sneered. "And when we do, we'll bring friends." When they were gone, the village stirred with quiet fear. The elder spoke gravely, warning of trouble ahead. Nantan began preparations, scouts, hidden paths, plans for safety. Through it all, Amelia helped where she could, her hands steady even as her heart raced. That night, as firelight danced against the canyon walls, she found Nantan alone by the river. "They'll come again," she whispered. "Yes," he said, "but fear is not our master." She looked at him, the strength in his face, the calm in his eyes, and something inside her hardened into resolve. "Then I'll stand with you." He turned to her, surprise flickering into quiet pride. "You already do," he said softly. Above them, the stars burned bright and unblinking, as if the heavens themselves were watching. In the silence between them, a bond was forged, not of gratitude, but of courage shared between 2 souls who refused to bow. For 3 days the village lived in uneasy quiet. The men doubled their watches, and the women packed food and water in case they had to flee into the cliffs. Amelia helped where she could, though her hands shook each time she thought of the riders' sneering faces. Still, Nantan's calm steadied her. When he spoke, the people listened, not because he shouted, but because he never did. "Fear feeds the enemy," he told the young hunters. "We feed each other instead." On the 4th morning, smoke rose from the western ridge. The warning drums began, slow then faster. Amelia was near the river washing clothes. She dropped everything and ran. By the time she reached the village, dust clouds rolled down the trail. 5 riders this time, rifles glinting in the sun. The scarred man led them. "Stay inside. Nantan ordered. No, Amelia said, breathless but defiant. They came for me. I won't hide. He met her eyes, a storm behind his calm. Then stay close to me. The riders halted just beyond the main fire pit. Told you we'd be back, the scarred man called. We'll take the woman, and we'll leave the rest of you in peace. Fight, and we burn this place to ash. Amelia stepped forward before Nantan could stop her. Her heart thundered so loud she could barely hear her own voice. You'll take nothing from here, she said. Not me. Not anything, the man laughed, spitting into the dust. You talk brave for someone who used to be sold by the pound. Something inside her broke, not in weakness, but in fury. Maybe once, she said, but not anymore. You can't sell what's already free. Before the words had even left her mouth, the man's hand moved for his gun. A single shot cracked the air, but it wasn't his. Nantan's rifle spoke first. The scarred man's hat flew off, the bullet grazing his temple. Chaos erupted. The villagers moved like shadows, arrows singing through the air. Horses screamed, smoke rose, and Amelia ducked behind a rock, heart pounding. She saw Nantan fighting, swift, precise, a force of the desert itself. When it was over, the surviving riders fled into the canyons, leaving the scarred man wounded in the dust. Nantan walked to him, rifle steady. You brought war, he said. Go, and tell your kind the river will wash away their footprints if they come again. The man spat blood and stumbled away, clutching his arm. As silence fell, Amelia realized her knees were trembling. Nantan turned to her, eyes soft despite the battle's edge. You spoke like fire, he said quietly. Even I would have listened. Tears burned her eyes, but she smiled through them. I was tired of being afraid. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Then fear has lost its hold, and for the first time she truly believed it. The air still smelled of smoke and gunpowder when dawn came. The fire pits burned low, casting soft embers that flickered like tired hearts. The battle had been won, but the cost of fear lingered in every breath. Amelia walked through the village, helping tend to the wounded. A young boy had a cut on his arm. She cleaned it with cool water and wrapped it carefully in cloth. Sani murmured a blessing over him, her voice steady despite exhaustion. When the last bandage was tied, Amelia finally allowed herself to sit. Her hands trembled. She looked down at the blood on her sleeves. Not her own, but enough to remind her of what could have been lost. You should rest, came Nantan's voice. She looked up. He stood beside her, a faint scratch across his cheek, the rest of him untouched, except for the weariness in his eyes. I'm fine, she said softly. He knelt beside her, lowering his voice. Fine people don't shake. She tried to laugh but couldn't. Maybe I just haven't stopped running. Even when I stand still. He studied her, silent for a long moment. You didn't run yesterday? No, she whispered. I couldn't. Nantan nodded, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. The fire inside you is stronger than you think. Something in her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the way he said it. Like a truth she hadn't believed until now. They sat in quiet for a while, the sound of the river carrying the night away. Then slowly, Nantan removed the turquoise necklace from his pocket. It had broken during the fight, one bead missing. He placed it gently in her hand. It can be mended, he said. Amelia traced the thread with her finger. So can I, she murmured. He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't just seen but felt. Yes, you already are. That evening, the villagers held a small feast, not to celebrate victory, but survival. They sang songs of strength, of ancestors watching from the stars. Amelia joined in quietly, her voice blending with theirs. When Nantan's gaze found her across the fire, something unspoken passed between them, something both tender and terrifying. Later, as the moon rose high, she walked alone to the riverbank. The water shimmered silver, calm again after all the chaos. She knelt and whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure to whom. The river, the sky, the spirits, or the man who had stood between her and death. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Nantan, you don't have to thank me," he said. "I wasn't," she replied softly, turning to meet his eyes. "I was thanking life for giving me another chance." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then don't waste it. She smiled, a small, real smile. And for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace. The days after the attack were different. The air seemed gentler, the river slower, as if the land itself was catching its breath. The people began to laugh again, small, cautious laughter that grew stronger each day. Amelia felt the change inside her, too. She no longer woke in the middle of the night gasping for air, haunted by shadows of chains and cruelty. Instead, she woke to birdsong, the scent of smoke, and the faint hum of life around her. Each morning she worked beside Sani, learning how to dye cloth with crushed roots. In the afternoons, she helped teach the children English words, while they taught her the language of the land. She learned that yate meant it is good, and that not every kind of strength was loud. Nantan was often nearby, though he spoke little. He watched her, sometimes with quiet amusement when she scolded the boys for teasing each other, sometimes with a look that made her forget to breathe. One evening, she found him by the horses, repairing a broken saddle strap. The light of sunset turned his skin bronze and his hair gold. "You work too much," she said gently. He didn't look up. "So do you," she smiled, kneeling beside him. "Maybe I'm trying to catch up to you." He finally glanced her way, eyes glinting with something almost playful. "You'd need a lifetime." Their laughter came easily, natural, like wind through leaves. For a moment, there was no past, no difference, no fear, just two souls sharing the same quiet. After a while, she noticed his hand bleeding where the leather had cut him. Without thinking, she took his hand in hers and wrapped it with a strip torn from her dress. "You should be more careful," she murmured. He studied her face, her care, her trembling fingers. "I am," he said softly. Now, their eyes met and neither looked away. The world seemed to hold still, the kind of stillness that comes before something changes forever. Amelia felt warmth spread through her, not just in her chest, but deep, where the pain used to live. "You saved me," she said quietly. "But not just from them. From myself," he shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I only reminded you how." The sky darkened, painted in shades of crimson and violet. She wanted to speak, to tell him what her heart already knew, but words felt too small for it. Instead, she simply whispered, "Thank you." Nantan rose, tying the finished strap to his saddle. "You don't owe me gratitude, Amelia," he said, his voice low, almost tender. "You owe yourself forgiveness." And then he walked away, leaving her standing in the dusk, the wind in her hair, the ache of unspoken love blooming quietly in her heart. That night, when she lay beneath her blanket, the turquoise necklace rested against her skin, whole again, repaired by her own hands. She smiled faintly in the dark, realizing that maybe she too was no longer broken. The desert night held its own kind of magic, vast and endless, with stars that looked close enough to touch. Amelia often sat by the river after the village had gone quiet, listening to the water whisper to the stones. It was the only place where she could think freely, without the noise of her own fears. That night, the moon rose full, silver and heavy, casting the land in soft light. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her shawl around her shoulders, humming a melody her mother used to sing before the world had turned cruel. She didn't hear Nantan approach. "You sing like the wind," he said softly. Taking a seat beside her, Amelia startled, then smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to wake anyone." "You didn't," he replied. "The night woke me first." They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds were the river's rhythm and the distant call of a coyote. Then Amelia spoke, quietly, as though afraid her words might vanish if she said them too loud. "I used to think I'd never belong anywhere again," she said. "That no matter how far I ran, I'd always be someone's possession, even in memory." Nantan turned to her, his gaze calm but steady. "You are not what they made you," he said. "You are what you choose now." She looked down at her hands, rough from work, stained with dye and soil, yet strong. "I don't know what I'm choosing anymore," she whispered. "Only that I feel alive here, whole. He reached out, his fingers brushing her wrist. A simple touch, but it felt like the world stopped spinning for a moment. Then stay, he said. Not because you owe anyone. Because this land, these people, we would be lesser without you. Her breath caught. You mean you would? He didn't deny it. The silence between them deepened, filled with things neither of them could yet name. Amelia looked up at the moon, her eyes glistening. Do you ever think about what comes next? Nantan's voice was a low murmur. The sun will rise. The seasons will turn. But what lives in our hearts, that is our choice. She turned toward him, tears shining in the moonlight. And if my heart chooses here? For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a gentleness that carried more weight than any promise, he lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest, where his heartbeat thudded steady and sure. Then it will be welcome, he whispered. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of sage and earth. The moon bathed them in light, and somewhere in the distance, the river sang its endless song. No vows were spoken, no promises made, but in that quiet space between heartbeats, love took root, not rushed, not fragile, but strong and certain, like the desert itself. The morning after the moonlit night felt different, lighter somehow, as though the earth itself had exhaled. The desert smelled of rain, though the sky was clear, and Amelia woke to the sound of laughter drifting through the village. She rose slowly, still feeling the warmth of Nantan's heartbeat against her palm. The memory was soft and unreal, like a dream she didn't want to end. Outside, the world was already moving, women weaving, children running barefoot through the dust, and Nantan helping a young hunter mend his bow. When his eyes met hers across the camp, the smallest smile curved his lips. It wasn't a secret anymore, not between them. Something had shifted, quiet but certain. Later, while they gathered herbs near the cliffs, Sani caught Amelia's hand with a knowing grin. You walk lighter these days, she teased. Your heart has found its rhythm. Amelia blushed, laughing. You always see too much. It's easy to see happiness, Sani said. It shines. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Nantan invited her to ride with him. The horses moved easily through the valley, hooves whispering over sand. The wind played with Amelia's hair as she breathed in the scent of sage and earth. They stopped near a ridge where the world stretched wide, endless plains, gold and red beneath the fading light. Amelia had never seen anything so beautiful. This is where I come when the world feels heavy, Nantan said quietly. The sky reminds me that nothing truly belongs to us, not land, not sorrow. We are only passing through. She turned to him, her voice barely more than a whisper. And what of love? Does that pass too? He hesitated, then shook his head. Love is not something we hold. It's something that holds us. His words sank deep, anchoring themselves in her chest. She wanted to speak, to tell him she was no longer afraid of being held, of belonging. But before she could, he lifted his hand, pointing toward the horizon. Look, he said, far in the distance. Riders moved, tiny figures against the fading sun. They were too far to name, but their presence sent a ripple of unease through the air. Nantan's expression darkened. The world beyond our valley is stirring again. Amelia followed his gaze, a shiver running through her. The peace they'd built felt fragile suddenly, like glass in a storm. What will you do? She asked softly. What I must, he said. Protect what we have. She looked at him, at the man who had saved her, taught her to live, and unknowingly claimed her heart, and she understood something painful and pure, that love, like freedom, was not safe. It was worth every risk. As night fell, she reached for his hand. Whatever comes, she whispered, you won't face it alone. He looked at her, the firelight of the setting sun caught in his eyes. No, he said, not anymore. And as the last light vanished behind the mountains, the wind carried their silence, a promise born of both love and courage. 3 nights after the riders were first seen on the horizon, the scouts returned with grim news. A small troop of soldiers was camped near the edge of the canyon. They carried banners Amelia recognized, symbols of the government's Western patrols. Fear rippled through the village. The memory of the last raid, the burned fields, the stolen horses, lived like scars on the land. Nantan gathered the elders beneath the council tree. Amelia stood at the edge, listening in silence as voices rose and fell like waves. Some wanted to move deeper into the mountains. Others believed they should stay and defend their home. Finally, Nantan spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "We will not abandon what is ours, but we must be wise. The soldiers are many, and their anger is blind." Then his gaze found Amelia. "They may have come for her." The words struck like a bell. She felt every eye turn toward her, not with blame, but with fear of what she might bring. "I didn't tell them," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted this." Sani rose, taking her hand. "We know, child." But Amelia could see the worry in their faces. Her presence, her skin, her past, had become a beacon, one that might draw danger to the people who had given her everything. That night, she walked alone to the riverbank, the same place where Nantan had once found her in tears. Now, it was her turn to decide what kind of woman she would be. She could run again, disappear into the desert, or she could stay and face what she feared most, the world that had once owned her. She didn't hear him approach, but when she turned, Nantan was there, his shadow tall against the moonlight. "You heard," he said quietly. She nodded. "They're here for me. If I leave, maybe—" He cut her off gently. "If you leave, they will come anyway. They always come for what they do not understand." Her throat tightened. "Then what do we do?" "We stand," he said, "together." For a long moment she searched his face, the calm in his eyes, the strength in his voice, and realized that this was the man she had been meant to find all along. Not to save her, but to remind her that she could save herself. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Good. Fear is for those who have something to lose. You have everything to protect." The moon rose higher, silver light gleaming on the river. Behind them, the village slept, unaware of how close the storm had come. Amelia reached for his hand, her grip steady. "Then let it come," she said. "This time, I won't run." Nantan squeezed her fingers once, firm and sure. "And this time," he replied, "you won't stand alone." The dawn came red, the kind of red that stains the sky before blood touches the earth. From the ridge above the valley, Amelia saw the soldiers advancing. The sun flashed against their rifles like shards of fire. Dust trailed behind their horses, curling into the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The villagers gathered in silence. Mothers held their children close. Warriors stood ready, bows and rifles in hand. The air smelled of fear and resolve. Nantan stood at the front, calm as stone. Amelia walked to his side, her hands shaking only slightly. "You should be with the others," he said softly. She shook her head. "Not this time." He looked at her, really looked. And something in his gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "They will not spare you. They already took everything once," she said. "They can't take what I've rebuilt." The soldiers rode closer. The leader, a sharp-faced officer with a polished badge, reined in his horse. "Step aside," he shouted. "We're here for the woman. Hand her over and no one gets hurt." No one moved. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Amelia stepped forward before Nantan could stop her. "You'll hurt them anyway," she said. "That's all men like you ever do." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You don't belong with these savages." She held his gaze, her voice clear as the morning air. "I belong where I am free." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the officer raised his hand, a signal. The soldiers cocked their rifles. Before the shots could ring out, Nantan stepped in front of her, rifle raised. His voice boomed like the storm itself. "You will not touch her." The sound that followed was chaos. Gunfire, shouts, the crack of arrows. Dust filled the air. Amelia ducked low, heart pounding, her mind torn between fear and fury. She saw one soldier aiming at Nantan from behind. Without thinking, she ran, grabbing a fallen pistol from the dirt. The shot she fired tore through the silence, striking the soldier down before he could pull the trigger. The noise stopped. Smoke hung heavy. The officer fell from his horse, wounded. The rest of the soldiers backed away, retreating toward the ridge. When the dust cleared, Nantan turned and saw her standing there, trembling, the pistol still warm in her hand. He crossed to her in 2 strides, taking the gun gently from her fingers. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you." He touched her face, his thumb brushing away the tears. "You never will." All around them the village began to stir, wounded but alive. The soldiers had fled, leaving behind silence and smoke. Amelia looked at the horizon, where the sky was slowly turning gold again. "It's over," she whispered. Nantan shook his head. "No," he said softly. "It's only beginning." She met his gaze, and for the first time, she understood. The battle was never just for survival. It was for love, for belonging, for the right to exist without fear, and they had won. Together. The battle had ended, but the echoes lingered. Smoke clung to the air for days, a ghost of what had almost been lost. The villagers moved quietly, tending to the wounded, mending the torn shelters, and burying what little had to be buried. The air was heavy, not with grief, but with the strange stillness that follows survival. Amelia worked without rest, her hands steady as she cleaned wounds and soothed frightened children. She didn't cry until the 3rd night, when she finally sat by the river and saw her reflection, dust-streaked, weary, and alive. The tears came then, not from sorrow but from the weight of everything she'd carried, and everything she'd finally set down. She didn't hear Nantan approach until his shadow fell across the water. "They're saying your courage saved us," he said. "They call you Tsanili now, the one who stands in the storm." Amelia smiled faintly through her tears. "I don't feel brave, I just couldn't lose anyone else." Nantan knelt beside her, his voice low and sure. "That is what bravery is, doing what must be done, even when the heart trembles." For a moment they said nothing, listening to the river's soft hum beneath the stars. Then Amelia turned toward him, her eyes shimmering. "I used to believe my life ended the day I was taken, but now I see it didn't end, it waited. It waited for this place, for you." He held her gaze, his expression unreadable, and then, slowly, gently, he reached out, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. "You were never lost," he said. "Only waiting to be found by yourself." She laughed softly, tears still glistening. "You always say the right thing." He smiled, not with words, but with warmth that melted the space between them. "Not always, but tonight I speak only truth, silence again, deep, beautiful, alive." The wind stirred her hair, and she didn't flinch when he reached up to tuck a strand behind her ear. The touch was so tender it felt like a vow. "You could have died," she whispered. "So could you," he replied. "But the spirits are not done with us yet." Her heart beat faster, the rhythm steady and wild all at once. "What do they want from us, then?" He looked up at the stars, their light reflected in his eyes. Maybe only this, that 2 hearts, born from pain, learned how to heal each other. Then he leaned closer, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath. "Stay," he said softly, "not as a guest, not as a memory, as part of us." Amelia's throat tightened, her tears turning to a trembling smile. "I already have." And beneath the vast desert sky, ancient, endless and kind, they let their foreheads rest together. Breathing the same air, no words left to say. The river sang its eternal song beside them. And for the first time, Amelia felt what she had always searched for, not freedom from the world, but belonging within it. When the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, the world looked reborn. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and river water. Amelia stood outside her hut, watching the sun climb slow and golden across the desert. Every sunrise had always felt like survival, But this morning, felt like life. The village stirred awake behind her. The sound of laughter, the crackle of new fires, the rhythm of peace returning. The war had passed. The soldiers had not returned. What was left was something fragile and precious. Calm, built from courage and love. Nantan approached quietly, as he always did. He was carrying a small woven basket filled with seeds. "It is planting season," he said. Amelia smiled. "Then we plant." They walked together to the edge of the riverbank, where the soil was dark and ready. Kneeling side by side, they pressed seeds into the earth. Corn, beans, squash, the crops that had fed his people for generations. Amelia's fingers sank into the cool soil, and she felt something deeper than work. A promise. She looked up at him. "You really believe it'll grow again?" Nantan's smile was soft. "The land always remembers how to heal." "So do people." She sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her hands. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve all this. Peace, love, a home." He studied her for a moment, then took her hand and placed it over his heart. "You do not deserve it," he said. "You earned it," her breath caught. The simplicity of his words reached her deeper than any vow. The children's laughter echoed across the field, and Sani waved from near the fires. For the first time, Amelia felt her smile reach all the way to her eyes. This place, once a refuge, was now her life, her family, her future. As the day warmed, she and Nantan walked to the ridge where they had first watched the horizon together. Below them the valley shimmered, green against red rock, a patch of life carved from the wild. "This land has changed you," Nantan said. Amelia shook her head. "No. It reminded me who I was before the world broke me." He turned toward her, the sun painting his face gold. "Then let us keep reminding each other." She reached for his hand. "Always." They stood together, the wind wrapping around them like a blessing. Behind them, the village thrived. Before them, the desert stretched endlessly, not empty, but full of stories waiting to be lived. And as the sun rose higher, Amelia felt no fear of what tomorrow might bring. The chains that once bound her were gone, melted into memory. What remained was love, steady, real, and as vast as the sky. The river whispered below, carrying life forward. The earth cradled the seeds they had planted. And when Amelia looked at Nantan, at the man who had become both her shelter and her freedom, she smiled and whispered, "Home." And that, my friends, was the story of Amelia and Nantan, two souls who found love, courage, and belonging in the harsh deserts of Arizona. A woman who once ran from her past, and a man who lived by honor. Together they proved that no storm is too strong when hearts stand as one. Their journey reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting where we come from. It's about finding someone who helps us remember who we truly are. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories are not about perfect people, but about broken hearts that choose to love again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, so I can bring you more stories filled with emotion, courage, and hope. And please, share in the comments. What part of this story moved you the most? Your words mean more than you know. Thank you for listening, my friends. Until the next story, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in love.